Bear Cub was pinned under a heavy ATV deep in the forest. What this baby did was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The forest was darker than usual that night. Mason Fletcher pulled his jacket tighter around his shoulders as he carried another bundle of firewood back to their campsite. His wife Ruby was still by the tent, humming softly to their 10-month-old daughter Willow. The baby cooed from her portable crib, her tiny fingers reaching up toward the stars that peeked through the pine branches overhead. "We should have brought more flashlights," Mason muttered, dropping the wood near their fire pit. The flames crackled and sent shadows dancing across the clearing. Ruby smiled at him, bouncing Willow gently in her arms. "Stop worrying so much," she said. "We've got everything we need right here." A strange, rumbling sound cut through the peaceful night. It wasn't thunder. The noise grew louder, closer. Mason stood up straight, squinting into the darkness beyond their camp. Headlights suddenly blazed through the trees, followed by the roar of an engine. "Who would be driving out here at this hour?" Ruby asked, holding Willow closer. The ATV burst through the underbrush about 50 yards from their camp. The driver seemed to be struggling with the controls. The vehicle swerved wildly between the trees, its engine screaming. Mason grabbed Ruby's arm, ready to pull her away if needed. Then it happened. The ATV hit something hard, maybe a rock or a fallen log. The machine flipped sideways with a terrible crash. The engine sputtered and died. The headlights went out. Everything fell silent except for the crackling of their campfire. "Should we check if they're okay?" Ruby whispered. Before Mason could answer, they heard something else, a sound that made Ruby's blood run cold. It wasn't human. It was a high-pitched cry, almost like a wounded animal. But there was something about it that sounded young, vulnerable. "That's not the driver," Mason said slowly. Willow started fussing in Ruby's arms. The baby twisted and turned, reaching toward the darkness where the ATV had crashed, her little face scrunched up with concern. "Shh, sweetie, it's okay." Ruby tried to calm her, but Willow kept straining toward the woods. Another cry pierced the night. This time it was clearer, a desperate, pained sound that echoed through the trees. Mason grabbed his flashlight and took a few steps toward the crash site. "Mason, wait," Ruby called after him. "What if there's a bear or something?" He paused, listening. The crying continued, weaker now. Whatever was making that sound was hurt, maybe trapped. Mason's flashlight beam cut through the darkness, but the crash was too far away to see clearly. "I have to check," he said. "Someone might need help." Ruby set Willow back in her crib, making sure the baby was secure. "Then I'm coming with you." They hadn't taken 3 steps when they heard movement in the opposite direction. Heavy footsteps, breaking branches. Something big was moving through the forest, and it was coming closer. "Get back to the baby," Mason whispered urgently. Ruby rushed back to the crib just as a figure stumbled into their campsite. It was the ATV driver, a young man, maybe 25, with a gash on his forehead. His clothes were torn, and he looked panicked. "My buddy's hurt bad," he gasped. "The ATV, we hit something and flipped. He's pinned under it." Mason pointed toward the crash. "We heard crying. Is your friend—" "That's not my friend," the driver interrupted, his eyes wild. "There's something else under there, something small. I think we hit a bear cub." Ruby gasped. Everyone knew what that meant. If there was a cub, the mother wouldn't be far away. And a mother bear protecting her injured baby was one of the most dangerous things you could encounter in these woods. The crying from the crash site grew more desperate. Willow began to whimper in her crib, her tiny arms waving in distress. She kept turning toward the sound, as if she understood that another baby, even if it wasn't human, was in trouble. "We need to get out of here," the driver said, backing away. "If the mother bear comes—" A branch snapped somewhere in the darkness, then another. Something large was definitely moving through the forest, getting closer to the crash site. The injured cub's cries became more frantic. Mason looked at Ruby, then at the driver. "We can't just leave it there to die." "Are you crazy?" the driver said. "That's nature. It happens. We need to go before—" A deep, rumbling growl cut through his words. It came from the direction of the crash, but not from under the ATV. This sound was bigger, angrier. The mother bear had found her cub. Willow suddenly let out a sharp cry. Before Ruby could reach her, the baby had somehow managed to roll herself toward the edge of the crib. Her little hands gripped the sides as she pulled herself up to a sitting position, something she'd never done before. "Willow, no!" Ruby rushed to grab her, but the baby was already reaching over the side of the crib. In the distance, they could hear thrashing. The mother bear was trying to reach her trapped cub. The ATV was heavy, too heavy for even a full-grown bear to move easily. The cub's cries were getting weaker. The driver was already backing toward his truck parked at the edge of the clearing. "I'm getting out of here. You should, too." Mason grabbed his arm. "You can't leave. That's your ATV. You did this." "I'll come back tomorrow with help," the driver said, pulling away. "I'm not staying here with an angry bear." He ran to his truck, jumped in, and drove off, leaving the Fletchers alone with their baby and the terrible sounds coming from the crash site. The mother bear's growls mixed with her cub's weakening cries created a heartbreaking symphony of desperation. Ruby held Willow, who was now crying harder than ever. The baby kept reaching toward the darkness, her little face red with distress. It was as if she could feel the other baby's pain and fear. "We have to do something," Ruby said, her voice shaking. Mason ran his hands through his hair. "The mother bear won't let us near. She'll attack if we try to help." But as they stood there, frozen with indecision, something unexpected happened. Willow suddenly went quiet. Her crying stopped. She looked directly at the darkness where the sounds were coming from, and a strange expression crossed her baby face, something that looked almost like determination. The forest held its breath. Even the mother bear's growls seemed to pause. In that moment of eerie silence, little Willow did something that would change everything. She spoke her first word, clear as day. In her tiny baby voice, she said, "Help." Ruby and Mason stared at their daughter in shock. Willow had never spoken before. She was only 10 months old, but there was no mistaking what they'd heard. The baby looked at her parents with those big, innocent eyes. Then she pointed toward the crash site and said it again, "Help." In the darkness, the mother bear had gone quiet. The only sound now was the weak whimpering of the trapped cub. And somehow, in that moment, everything felt different. The very air seemed charged with possibility. Mason and Ruby looked at each other. Their baby, their tiny, 10-month-old daughter, had just done something impossible. And maybe, just maybe, it was a sign that they needed to do the impossible too. The silence stretched on. Ruby's hands trembled as she held Willow closer. The baby's eyes never left the darkness where the crash had happened. She reached out her chubby arms again, more insistent this time. "Help," Willow repeated, her voice clearer than any baby's should be. Mason took a shaky breath. "Did she really just—" "She's never said a word before," Ruby whispered. "Not Mama, not Dada, and now." A low moan came from the crash site. The mother bear was still there, still trying to free her cub. They could hear her massive paws scraping against the metal, the sound of her desperate efforts carrying through the trees. Mason picked up his flashlight again. "I'm going to take a look, just to see how bad it is." "Mason, no, I'll stay far back, I promise." He kissed Ruby's forehead, then Willow's. The baby grabbed his finger with surprising strength. "Help," she said again, looking right into his eyes. Mason felt something shift inside him. Those innocent eyes held a wisdom that seemed impossible for someone so young. He gently freed his finger and started walking toward the crash site, his flashlight beam wavering slightly. The scene that met him was worse than he'd imagined. The ATV lay on its side, its heavy frame completely covering the back half of a small bear cub. The little creature was maybe 6 months old, its fuzzy brown fur matted with dirt and leaves. Its front paws scraped weakly at the ground, trying to pull itself free. The mother bear stood nearby, a massive shadow in the darkness. Mason's flashlight caught the reflection of her eyes. 2 glowing orbs filled with rage and fear. She was easily 400 pounds, her powerful muscles tensed and ready to charge. But something held her back. Maybe she was afraid of hurting her cub more if she attacked the ATV directly. Mason slowly backed away, keeping his movements calm and deliberate. The mother bear watched him, her head low, a deep rumble in her throat. When he was safely back at the campsite, Ruby rushed to him. "What did you see?" "The cub's completely trapped. Back legs pinned under the ATV. The mother, she's right there. She's huge, Ruby. There's no way we can get close." Willow started crying again, but it wasn't her usual baby cry. It was mournful, almost like she was grieving. She kept reaching toward the crash site, her little face scrunched with emotion. "We have to call for help," Ruby said. She grabbed her phone from the tent, but the screen showed no signal. They were too deep in the forest. "The ranger station is an hour away," Mason said. "By the time they get here—" He didn't need to finish. They both knew the cub might not survive that long. The crying from the crash site was getting weaker by the minute. Willow suddenly squirmed in Ruby's arms with surprising strength. She twisted and turned, trying to get down. Ruby had to adjust her grip to keep the baby from falling. "Willow, stop! You'll hurt yourself." But the baby was determined. She pointed again at the darkness and said something new. "Friend." Mason and Ruby exchanged another shocked look. 2 words now. 2 impossible words from their 10-month-old daughter. "She's never even been around other babies much," Ruby said, her voice tight with emotion. "How does she know—" A strange sound interrupted her. It was coming from Willow. The baby was making a low, soft humming sound. Not quite human, but not quite animal either. It was soothing, almost hypnotic. And then something incredible happened. The mother bear's growling stopped. The forest went completely silent except for Willow's strange humming. Even the injured cub seemed to quiet down, its whimpers fading to soft huffs. "What is she doing?" Mason whispered. Ruby shook her head, unable to speak. She was watching her daughter with a mixture of awe and fear. Willow's eyes had taken on an odd gleam in the firelight, and her humming grew stronger, more confident. The mother bear took a step back from the ATV, then another. Her massive head swung toward their campsite, and for a terrifying moment Mason thought she was going to charge. But instead, she just stood there, swaying slightly, as if Willow's humming had put her in some kind of trance. I think she's calming the bear," Ruby breathed. Willow stopped humming and looked up at her parents. Her expression was eerily adult-like, as if she understood exactly what needed to happen next. "Help friend now," she said, each word crystal clear. Mason's hands were shaking as he grabbed a sturdy branch from their firewood pile. "This is insane. This is completely insane. Mason, what are you doing? I'm going to try to leverage the ATV up, just enough for the cub to crawl out." He looked at Willow, who nodded, actually nodded, as if approving his plan. "Keep her humming. Whatever she's doing, it's working." Ruby held Willow facing the crash site. The baby immediately started her strange humming again. The sound seemed to fill the forest, wrapping around the trees like a gentle fog. Mason approached the ATV slowly, the branch in his hands. The mother bear watched him but didn't move. Her eyes looked almost glassy, hypnotized by Willow's sound. He could see the trapped cub more clearly now. Its breathing was shallow, its little body trembling with pain and fear. "It's okay, little guy," Mason whispered, positioning the branch under the ATV's frame. "We're going to get you out." He pushed down on the branch with all his weight. The ATV creaked but didn't budge. Mason adjusted his position and tried again. This time, the machine lifted slightly, just an inch or two, but it might be enough. "Come on," he grunted, straining against the weight. "Move." The cub seemed to understand. It started pulling with its front paws, trying to drag itself free. The mother bear made a soft whuffing sound, as if encouraging her baby. But then Willow's humming faltered. The baby was getting tired. The spell, or whatever it was, began to break. The mother bear shook her massive head, blinking rapidly. Her eyes cleared, focusing on Mason with sudden, terrible clarity. She roared. Mason's blood turned to ice. The bear took a step toward him, her lips pulled back to reveal enormous teeth. He was going to die. He was too far from the campsite to run, and the bear was too close, too angry, too protective of her cub. But then Willow did something else impossible. The baby pulled free from Ruby's arms, actually pulled herself free with strength no infant should have, and crawled. Not the clumsy crawling of a normal baby, but a determined, purposeful movement toward the crash site. "Willow, no!" Ruby screamed, lunging after her daughter. But Willow was already halfway there, moving faster than seemed possible. The mother bear's attention shifted to this new, tiny creature approaching her cub. She roared again, but there was confusion in the sound now. Willow reached the edge of the crash site and sat up. She looked directly at the mother bear and spoke in a voice that seemed to come from somewhere much older, much wiser than her tiny body. "Trust," she said. "Save baby, trust." The mother bear froze. Her massive head tilted, studying this strange human cub who spoke to her, who hummed songs that calmed her rage. Willow reached out her tiny hand toward the trapped cub, not quite touching, but close enough to show she meant no harm. The forest held its breath. Mason still had the branch under the ATV, ready to lift. Ruby stood paralyzed with fear, watching her infant daughter sit mere feet from a wild bear that could kill her with one swipe of its paw. And then the mother bear did something no one could have predicted. She lay down. This enormous, powerful predator simply lay down on the forest floor, her eyes never leaving Willow. It was submission. It was trust. It was impossible. Willow looked back at Mason and nodded again. "Now," she said. Mason didn't question it. He threw all his weight onto the branch, lifting the ATV higher than before. The trapped cub, sensing freedom, pulled harder with its front paws. Inch by inch, it dragged itself free from under the machine. The moment the cub was clear, Mason let the ATV drop and scrambled backward. The cub lay panting on the ground, its back legs scraped and bloody but moving. It was hurt, but alive. The mother bear rose slowly, approaching her injured baby. She sniffed it carefully, licked its wounds gently. Then she did something that made Ruby gasp. She looked at Willow and lowered her massive head in what could only be described as a bow. A thank you. An acknowledgement of the impossible thing that had just happened. Willow smiled, a baby's smile, innocent and pure, and reached out to touch the cub's head. The mother bear didn't stop her. The baby's tiny fingers brushed through the cub's soft fur, and both bears made a sound that was almost like purring. "Willow," Ruby whispered, finally finding her voice, "come back to Mama." But Willow wasn't done. She looked up at the mother bear and spoke one more time. "Go now, safe place. Heal, baby." The mother bear huffed softly, then gently picked up her cub by the scruff of its neck. The little one whimpered but didn't struggle. With one last look at Willow, the mother bear turned and disappeared into the forest, her injured baby safe in her jaws. As soon as they were gone, Willow's extraordinary presence seemed to fade. She blinked, yawned, and started crying. Normal baby crying this time. Ruby rushed forward and scooped her up, holding her so tight it must have hurt. My baby," she sobbed. "What just happened? What did you just do?" Mason stood there in shock, the branch still in his hands. He looked at the spot where the bears had vanished, then at his daughter, who was now sucking her thumb like any ordinary infant. "I don't know," he said slowly, "but I think we just witnessed something that shouldn't be possible." Willow had already fallen asleep in Ruby's arms, exhausted from whatever had just happened. She looked so normal now, so perfectly ordinary, but they had seen what they had seen, heard what they had heard. As they walked back to their campsite, Mason noticed something that made him stop cold. There were tracks in the soft earth near where Willow had crawled. Baby tracks, yes, but next to them, almost overlapping, were other prints. Tiny paw prints that looked remarkably like those of a bear cub. He knelt down, studying them in his flashlight beam. It was impossible. Willow hadn't been near enough to the cub to leave overlapping tracks. Unless... "Ruby," he called softly. "Come look at this." Ruby approached, still clutching their sleeping daughter. When she saw the tracks, she inhaled sharply. "Those can't be." She didn't. But the evidence was right there in the dirt. Somehow, their baby girl had left tracks that merged with those of the bear cub, as if, for those few crucial minutes, they had been connected in a way that defied explanation. A cool breeze swept through the campsite, making their fire flicker. In the distance, they could hear the normal sounds of the forest returning. Owls hooting, small creatures rustling in the underbrush. The night was trying to return to normal. But nothing would ever be normal again. Not after what they'd witnessed. Their 10-month-old daughter had done something that challenged everything they thought they knew about the world. Mason put his arm around Ruby, and together they stared into the darkness where the bears had disappeared. Somewhere out there, a mother bear was tending to her injured cub, alive because of their baby's impossible gift. "What do we do now?" Ruby asked quietly. Mason didn't have an answer. How could he? Their daughter had spoken her first words tonight. Not mama or dada, but help and friend and trust. She had calmed a raging bear with mysterious humming. She had shown strength and wisdom no baby should possess. "We protect her," he said finally, "and we watch. And we try to understand." Willow stirred in Ruby's arms, mumbling something in her sleep. It sounded like words, but in a language neither parent recognized. Then she settled again, her tiny hand clutching her mother's shirt. They returned to their campsite, but neither could sleep. They sat by the dying fire, taking turns holding Willow, watching her peaceful face for any sign of the extraordinary being they'd glimpsed tonight. As dawn approached, painting the sky with soft pastels, Mason thought he heard something. It was faint, carried on the morning breeze, but unmistakable. The sound of a bear cub playing, healthy and whole. And for just a moment, Willow opened her eyes and smiled. The next few hours passed in a blur. Mason and Ruby packed up their campsite in silence, both lost in their thoughts about what had transpired. The ATV still lay on its side where it had fallen, a dark reminder of the night's events. Mason thought about calling the authorities to report it, but what would he say? That his infant daughter had talked to bears and saved a cub's life. As Ruby folded the tent, she kept glancing at Willow, who was back in her crib, playing with her favorite stuffed rabbit as if nothing unusual had happened. The baby seemed completely normal now, babbling nonsense sounds, drooling on her toys, kicking her little legs in the air. "Maybe we imagined it," Ruby said softly, though she knew they hadn't. Mason was loading their cooler into the truck when he noticed something that made his heart skip. There were people approaching through the trees, 2 figures in dark green uniforms, forest rangers. "Morning, folks," the older ranger called out as they got closer. He was a burly man with graying hair and keen eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His badge read, Ranger Collins. The younger ranger beside him looked fresh out of training, eager and alert. "Morning," Mason replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "We were just packing up." Ranger Collins nodded, but his eyes had already found the overturned ATV. "That yours?" "No, sir. Some guy crashed it here last night. He took off in his truck." Mason hesitated. "There was an incident." The younger ranger, whose badge said Stevens, pulled out a notepad. "What kind of incident?" Ruby had joined them now, Willow balanced on her hip. The baby was chewing on her fingers, looking perfectly ordinary. "The ATV trapped a bear cub," Ruby said. The driver panicked and left. Collins raised an eyebrow. "A cub? Where's it now?" "Gone," Mason said, "with its mother. They both left after we managed to free it." "You freed a trapped cub?" Stevens looked skeptical. "With the mother bear right there?" Mason and Ruby exchanged a quick glance. How could they explain what really happened? "She seemed to understand we were trying to help," Ruby said carefully. Collins walked over to the ATV, examining the ground around it. His expression grew more serious as he studied the tracks. "These prints—" He knelt down, running his fingers over the dirt. "Stevens, come look at this." The younger ranger joined him. "What is it?" "I've been tracking animals in these woods for 30 years, Collins said slowly. "I've never seen anything like this." He pointed to the overlapping prints Mason had noticed earlier. "These tracks, they merge, like 2 different creatures walking in perfect sync." Willow chose that moment to make a sound, not a word, just a happy baby gurgle. But both rangers looked up at her sharply, as if they'd heard something else entirely. "How old is your daughter?" Collins asked, his weathered face unreadable. 10 months, Ruby answered, holding Willow a little tighter. Collins stood up, dusting off his hands. His eyes never left Willow. "I need to ask you folks some questions about exactly what happened here last night." Mason felt his mouth go dry. "We told you, the ATV crashed, trapped a cub, we freed it." "The truth," Collins said quietly. "I've seen a lot of strange things in these woods, Mr. Fletcher. Mason Fletcher. This is my wife, Ruby. Mr. Fletcher, there are old stories about these forests. Stories the native tribes used to tell about children born with gifts. Children who could speak to the spirits of the woods." Collins's eyes were intense now. "I need to know if your daughter is one of them." Stevens looked confused. "Sir, what are you talking about?" Collins ignored him. "The tracks don't lie, and there's something else." He pulled out his phone, showing them a blurry photo. Trail camera caught this about 3 miles north of here, just after dawn. The image showed a large mother bear walking through the forest. In her mouth was a cub, clearly injured but alert. But that wasn't what made Ruby gasp. Walking beside the bear, keeping perfect pace, was what looked like a ghostly image of a small child. Transparent, ethereal, but unmistakably there. "That's impossible," Mason breathed. "Lots of impossible things happen in these woods," Collins said. "Now, I'm going to ask again. What really happened last night?" Before anyone could answer, Willow spoke. Clear as day, she looked at Ranger Collins and said, "Bear's safe now." Stevens dropped his notepad. Collins's eyes widened, but he didn't look as shocked as he should have. Instead, he looked relieved. "She's one of them," he said softly. "After all these years, another one." "Another what?" Ruby demanded, fear creeping into her voice. Collins reached into his pocket and pulled out an old worn photograph. It showed a young girl, maybe 5 years old, standing next to a massive elk. The child's hand rested on the animal's neck, and both seemed to be looking at something beyond the camera. "This was my sister," Collins said. 40 years ago, she had the gift too, could talk to animals, understand them, help them. His voice grew thick with emotion. "She saved dozens of creatures in these woods before—" "Before what?" Mason asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. "Before she disappeared," Collins finished. "On her 7th birthday. Walked into the forest to help an injured owl and never came back. Search teams found nothing. It was like the forest just absorbed her." Ruby clutched Willow tighter. "You're scaring us." "I don't mean to," Collins said gently. "But you need to understand. Your daughter has a gift that's both wonderful and dangerous. The forest knows her now. The animals know her. And once that connection is made, it can't be unmade." Willow reached out toward the photograph in Collins' hand. "Friend," she said clearly. Collins' hand trembled. "She recognized it, but that's impossible. Unless ... He looked at the parents with something like awe. "They say the gifted ones can sense each other across time, that their spirits leave echoes in the woods." "This is crazy," Mason said, but his voice lacked conviction. After what they'd witnessed, nothing seemed too crazy anymore. Stevens had been silent, staring at Willow with wide eyes. Now he spoke up. "The Thompson farm, sir. Remember the Thompson farm?" Collins nodded grimly. 3 weeks ago. Every animal on the property, cattle, horses, chickens, even the dogs, they all got sick at once. Vet couldn't figure out what was wrong. Then, one morning, they were all better. The farmer's wife swears she saw a child in their barn that night. A child who wasn't there in the morning. You think that was... Ruby looked down at Willow, who was now playing with her mother's hair. "I don't know," Collins admitted. "But animal illnesses don't just cure themselves overnight, and the timing..." He shook his head. "Has Willow been sick recently?" "Any unexplained absences? Nights when she seemed different?" Ruby's face went pale. 3 weeks ago, she had a fever. We put her to bed early, but when we checked on her in the night, her crib was empty. We found her on the floor by the window, looking out at the moon. We thought she'd climbed out somehow, but 10-month-olds can't climb out of cribs," Mason finished. Collins pocketed the photograph. "Listen carefully. What your daughter has is ancient, older than these woods, older than any of us can understand. The Native Americans called it walking between, the ability to exist in both worlds, ours and theirs. Theirs? Ruby asked. The animal world, the spirit world, call it what you want. Collins gestured to the forest around them. To most of us, these are just trees and dirt and creatures trying to survive. But to someone like Willow, it's all alive, all connected, all speaking a language she understands. Willow had been quiet during this exchange, but now she looked directly at Collins. She's still here, the baby said. Your sister, in the big tree. Collins went very still. What did you say? Big tree by water. She lives there now, not gone, just different. Willow's voice was matter-of-fact, as if she was stating something obvious. The ranger's legs seemed to give out. He sat heavily on a nearby log, his face white. The old oak by Morrison Creek. That's where she loved to play. We searched that area 100 times. Sir, Stevens said urgently, the protocol. We're supposed to report any confirmed cases to no one. Collins cut him off sharply. This stays between us. He looked at the Fletchers. Listen to me. There are people who would want to study your daughter, test her, turn her into a laboratory experiment. You can't let that happen. We won't, Mason said firmly. But what do we do? Ruby asked. How do we protect her? How do we help her understand what's happening to her? Collins stood up, seeming to gather himself. For now, you go home, live normally, but watch her. Document anything unusual, and if she starts to change, if the gift grows stronger, you call me. He handed Mason a business card. My personal number, day or night. As they talked, none of them noticed Willow's eyes had gone strange again. She was looking past them, into the trees, as if seeing something they couldn't. Her little mouth moved, forming silent words. Then, without warning, birds began landing around them. First one, then dozens. Sparrows, blue jays, cardinals, even a hawk. They perched on branches, on the truck, on the ground, all facing Willow. Dear God, Stevens whispered. Willow giggled and held out her hands. A small sparrow immediately landed on her tiny fingers. She brought it close to her face, and for a moment, child and bird seemed to have a conversation no one else could hear. Then Willow spoke again, but this time her voice was different. Older, sadder. The sickness comes soon, many will die, unless ... Unless what? Collins leaned forward, intense. Willow's eyes cleared. She was just a baby again, confused by the bird on her hand. The sparrow chirped once and flew away, followed by all the others in a rush of wings. The sickness, Collins muttered. Every few decades something sweeps through the wildlife population here, decimates everything. We've never figured out what causes it or how to stop it. You think Willow knows? Ruby asked. I think Willow might be the key to preventing it, Collins said slowly. If the old stories are true, the gifted ones don't just talk to animals. They're guardians, protectors. They maintain the balance. Stevens was typing frantically on his phone. Sir, the last wildlife epidemic was in 1987, 37 years ago. And according to the records, it stopped suddenly. No explanation, just like the Thompson farm. The year my sister disappeared, Collins said quietly. She was 7, old enough to understand her gift, old enough to use it. He looked at Willow with tears in his eyes. Maybe she didn't disappear. Maybe she became something else, something the forest needed. Willow yawned, rubbing her eyes with chubby fists. She was getting tired, all this excitement wearing on her little body. But as Ruby lifted her to put her in the car seat, the baby spoke one more time. Soon, she said, looking at Collins. Sister says soon. Then she closed her eyes and fell asleep, leaving 4 adults standing in stunned silence in a forest that suddenly seemed very much alive. Collins finally broke the quiet. "Take her home. Keep her safe. But be ready. If my sister's right, if Willow is right, something big is coming. And your daughter might be the only one who can stop it." As the Fletchers drove away, Mason watched in the rearview mirror as the two rangers stood by the overturned ATV, deep in conversation. The morning sun was fully up now, streaming through the trees, making everything look normal and peaceful. But Mason knew better. Nothing would ever be normal again. His daughter, his tiny, impossible daughter, was connected to something ancient and powerful, and whatever was coming, they would face it together. In her car seat, Willow slept peacefully, her stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. But Ruby, watching her daughter carefully, could have sworn she saw the toy's button eyes blink. The forest fell away behind them as they headed home, but its mysteries followed. In the weeks to come, they would learn just how deep those mysteries went. And Willow, the baby who could speak to bears and see the spirits of the lost, would grow into a destiny none of them could yet imagine. But for now she just slept, dreaming dreams that bridged two worlds, while somewhere in an old oak tree by a creek, a spirit that had once been a little girl named Emma Collins smiled and whispered to the wind, "She's here. The new guardian is here. The forest will survive." The morning sun climbed higher, and life in the woods continued its ancient dance. But now there was a new player in that dance, a baby named Willow who would change everything. Mason glanced at Ruby. She was staring out the window, lost in thought. He reached over and squeezed her hand. "We'll figure this out," he said. Ruby squeezed back. "I know, it's just... Our baby girl can talk to animals. She sees spirits. She might be the key to saving an entire ecosystem. How do we even process that?" In the back seat, Willow stirred but didn't wake. Instead, she mumbled something in her sleep. It sounded like words, but in no language her parents recognized. And outside the car, following them home, a red-tailed hawk circled overhead, keeping watch. The adventure was just beginning. 3 days passed in a strange mix of normalcy and constant watchfulness. Mason had returned to work at the construction site, but his mind kept drifting to Willow. Ruby stayed home, ostensibly doing her freelance graphic design work, but mostly she found herself observing their daughter for any sign of another episode. Willow seemed perfectly ordinary. She crawled around the living room, played with blocks, took her naps on schedule. The only unusual thing was how their neighbor's cat, Mr. Whiskers, now spent most of his time sitting outside their window, staring in at Willow. It was Thursday afternoon when everything changed again. Ruby was in the kitchen making lunch when she heard Willow laughing in her playpen. Not just giggling, full, delighted laughter that seemed too mature for a baby. She rushed into the living room and froze. The playpen was empty. "Willow!" Ruby's heart hammered as she spun around. "Willow, where are you?" More laughter, coming from upstairs. But that was impossible. Willow couldn't climb stairs. Ruby raced up, taking the steps 2 at a time. She followed the sound to their bedroom and pushed open the door. Willow was sitting on the floor by the window, surrounded by animals. Not just Mr. Whiskers. There were 3 cats, 2 dogs she'd never seen before, a rabbit, and incredibly, perched on the windowsill, a large crow. They all sat in a perfect circle around the baby, who was babbling happily and reaching out to touch each one in turn. "How did you—" Ruby's voice trailed off as she noticed the window was closed and locked. The bedroom door had been shut. There was no way these animals could have gotten in. Willow looked up at her mother and smiled. "Friends come," she said simply. Before Ruby could respond, the animals began to disperse. They didn't run or panic. They simply faded, becoming translucent and then disappearing entirely like morning mist. Only Willow remained, sitting there as if nothing unusual had happened. Ruby sank onto the bed, her legs shaky. She pulled out her phone and called Mason. "She did it again," she said when he answered. "But this time, Mason, I think she brought them through walls. Or they weren't really here at all. I don't know which is worse." "I'm coming home," Mason said immediately. "No, wait." Ruby watched as Willow crawled over to her toy box, babbling normally again. "Ranger Collins said to document everything. I need to write this down while it's fresh." She spent the next hour recording every detail in a notebook Collins had suggested they keep. Time, date, what she saw, what Willow said. As she wrote, she noticed Willow kept looking at the corner of the room, smiling and waving at empty air. That evening, after Mason came home, they sat together on the couch while Willow played on the floor. The house felt different somehow. Charged. Like the air before a thunderstorm. "Collins called me at work today," Mason said quietly. 3 dogs went missing from the shelter last night. They found them this morning in the forest, all together, about 5 miles from where we were camping. "You think Willow. I don't know. Can she affect things from this distance? Can she call animals to specific places?" Mason rubbed his face. "This is so far beyond anything I can understand." Willow chose that moment to stand up, not pull herself up on furniture like she'd been practicing. Just stand. Her legs, which had been wobbly and uncertain just days ago, now held her steady. "Bird's sick," she announced, pointing at the window. Ruby and Mason looked but saw nothing. Willow toddled, actually walked, to the glass and pressed her tiny hand against it. "Help, Bird," she insisted. Mason opened the front door and stepped outside. There, on their porch, lay a robin. Its wing was bent at an odd angle, and it was breathing rapidly, clearly in distress. "How did she know?" he whispered. Ruby appeared with Willow in her arms. The baby reached toward the injured bird, making soft cooing sounds. As Ruby knelt down, still holding Willow, the strangest thing happened. The air around Willow's outstretched hand shimmered, like heat waves rising from asphalt. The robin's breathing slowed. Its wing straightened with a small pop. And then, as if waking from sleep, the bird righted itself, chirped once, and flew away. "Did she just—" Mason couldn't finish the sentence. "Heal it," Ruby breathed. She healed it. Willow clapped her hands, delighted. "Bird, better. Fly now." They were still processing this when a car pulled into their driveway. Ranger Collins got out, his face grave. He wasn't alone. A woman in her 60s followed him, wearing a long skirt and a necklace of what looked like carved wooden animals. "This is Mary Whitehorse," Collins said without preamble. "She's from the local tribal council. She needs to see Willow." Mary's eyes were already fixed on the baby. Her weathered face showed a mix of reverence and concern. "She's strong," the woman said softly. "Stronger than any I've seen." "You've seen others?" Ruby asked, holding Willow protectively. Mary nodded. 3 in my lifetime, but none so young, none so—" She paused, searching for words. "The spirits are drawn to her like moths to flame." "Please," Mason said, "we need answers. What's happening to our daughter?" Mary stepped closer, her movements careful and respectful. "May I?" She held out her hands toward Willow. Ruby hesitated, then nodded. Mary took the baby gently, and Willow went without fuss, studying the older woman's face with those impossible, knowing eyes. Mary closed her eyes and began to hum, a low, rhythmic sound that reminded them of Willow's humming from that night in the forest. The air in the room grew thick. heavy with an unseen presence. Suddenly, Mary's eyes snapped open. She handed Willow back to Ruby quickly, almost fearfully. "She's not just gifted," Mary said, her voice shaking. "She's a bridge." "A bridge?" Mason asked. "Between worlds. Between the living and the spirit realm, between human and animal consciousness." Mary sat heavily in their porch chair. Once in a generation, sometimes less, a child is born who doesn't just communicate with the other side. They can bring it through. They can merge the worlds. "That sounds dangerous," Ruby said, clutching Willow tighter. "It is," Collins interjected. "My sister Emma, we think she tried to bridge the worlds permanently, to save the forest from that sickness. But she wasn't strong enough. She got lost between them." Mary nodded gravely. "But this one," she gestured to Willow, "she has the power to succeed where others failed. The spirits are already preparing. Can't you feel it? The forest is waking up." As if to prove her point, their backyard suddenly filled with animals. Deer, rabbits, squirrels, birds, dozens of creatures, all sitting quietly, all facing the house, facing Willow. "Jesus," Mason breathed. "They know," Mary said. "They know the sickness is coming, and they know she's their only hope." Willow squirmed in Ruby's arms, reaching toward the gathered animals. "Help friends," she said firmly. "Stop sick." "When?" Collins asked Mary urgently. "How long do we have?" Mary closed her eyes, concentrating. "The signs point to the new moon. 2 weeks." "2 weeks to what?" Ruby demanded. "To when the sickness begins," Mary said, "unless she intervenes, unless she bridges the worlds and heals the source." "She's just a baby." Ruby's voice cracked. "She can barely walk. How can she possibly—" "She won't be alone," Mary interrupted. "The spirits will guide her. The animals will protect her," and she glanced at Collins. "She'll have help from the other side." "Emma," Collins said quietly. "My sister. She's been preparing for this, waiting for someone strong enough to finish what she started." Willow had gone very still in Ruby's arms. Her eyes were closed, but her lips moved constantly, as if in conversation with someone only she could see. Then she opened her eyes and spoke in a voice that wasn't quite her own. "The old growth grove, where the 3 rivers meet, the source is there, the break between worlds." Mary gasped. "She's channeling. The spirit realm is speaking through her." "That's 30 miles north," Collins said, "deep in protected forest. No roads, no trails." "Full moon ceremony," Willow continued in that strange voice. "Bring the bridge, heal the wound, save all." Then she blinked, yawned, and was just a baby again, rubbing her eyes sleepily. The animals in the backyard began to disperse, melting back into the growing darkness. The air felt lighter, but charged with purpose. "We have 2 weeks," Mary said, standing. 2 weeks to prepare her, to prepare yourselves. This won't be easy, the bridging ceremony. It's dangerous. She could get lost like the others. But if she succeeds, the forest will be healed," Collins finished. "The cycle of sickness broken, the balance restored." "And if she fails?" Mason asked, though he dreaded the answer. Mary and Collins exchanged a look. "Then we lose her," Mary said softly, "and the forest dies. Permanently this time. The sickness will spread beyond these woods into towns, cities, without a bridge to maintain the balance." She didn't need to finish. They understood. After the visitors left, Ruby and Mason sat in their living room, Willow asleep between them. The weight of what they'd learned pressed down like a physical thing. "Our baby," Ruby whispered, "our little girl. How can we let her do this?" "How can we stop her?" Mason replied. "You saw those animals. You've seen what she can do. This is bigger than us, Ruby. This is destiny, Ruby finished bitterly. I hate that word. Willow stirred in her sleep, one tiny hand clutching each parent. Even unconscious, she seemed to be bridging them, connecting them, making them stronger together. We'll protect her, Mason said firmly. Whatever happens, we'll be there. We won't let her face this alone. Ruby nodded, tears streaming down her face. 2 weeks. 2 weeks to teach our baby to save the world. Outside, the night was full of sounds. Owls calling, coyotes howling, the rustle of countless small creatures. But underneath it all was something else. A pulse, a rhythm, like a great heart beating slowly, weakly, waiting for healing. The forest was counting down, and in a small house at the edge of town, a little girl who could bridge worlds slept peacefully, dreaming of bears and birds, and the sister spirit who would soon teach her to fly between the realms. The next morning brought new challenges. Willow woke up floating 3 inches above her crib mattress. Ruby found her there, suspended in midair, giggling at dust motes dancing in the morning sunlight. "Mason!" Ruby's call was half shriek, half whisper. He rushed in and stopped dead. Their daughter was defying gravity, her tiny body relaxed and comfortable as she hovered. "Down," Willow said cheerfully, and promptly dropped onto the mattress with a soft plop. Did she just... Mason couldn't even form the question. "Control it," Ruby finished. She controlled it. They looked at each other, the same thought crossing their minds. If she could control levitation at 10 months old, what else could she do? And more importantly, what would she need to do in 2 weeks' time? Mason's phone rang. Collins. "There's been a development," the ranger said without greeting. "Dead birds found near Morrison Creek, dozens of them. It's starting early." Mason relayed the information to Ruby, who was lifting Willow from the crib. The baby seemed heavier than usual, as if gravity was being weird around her. "We need to see Mary Whitehorse again," Mason said into the phone. "Today." "She's already on her way to you," Collins replied. "She felt it too, the acceleration. We might not have 2 weeks after all." As Mason hung up, Willow spoke again, but this time her voice carried an echo, as if 2 people were speaking in unison. "Time short, learn fast, sister, help." And in the corner of the room, just for a moment, they could swear they saw a shimmer in the air, the outline of a young girl, transparent and glowing, watching them with eyes full of ancient wisdom. Emma Collins, the last bridge, come to train her successor for the battle that would determine the fate of everything they held dear. The real preparation was about to begin.